you're very upfront
Pretty much.
about talking about this killing.
Right.
You murdered this man.
Yes,
You tortured him.
of course.
It was the 5th night of August 2009, around 5 a.m. The Phoenix, Arizona Police Department received a call. It was from the church. The church noticed smoke from a garbage can in their parking lot. Someone had lit it on fire. Probably just a prank, they thought. Kids like to fool around and light fires in the most random places just to disturb the neighborhood. Or maybe someone threw a cigarette in there. The church also called the firefighters to mitigate the situation, so it didn't spread and cause a disaster. Little did they know, a tragedy had already taken place. Firefighters arrived at the scene and quickly got on with their job of taming the fire. As the flames died down, the contents of the bin became visible, and what they saw left the onlookers scarred forever. The firefighters said that this discovery was the most disturbing scene they had ever encountered. Inside the garbage can were the charred remains of a human body. Welcome back to Twisted Minds. My name is James, and the case that we will be digging up today is that of Angela Simpson, a goosebump-inducing story of a cold-blooded killer who does not have the word remorse in her dictionary. The police were informed by the church and were called to investigate the situation and get further details. In order to conduct tests and discover the truth, the body was taken out of the trash. Looking at the body, all they could make out about the deceased was that he was a man. They didn't know anything else. The burns on the body rendered it unrecognizable. When the body was removed, it became evident that it had not only been burned by the fire, but also it had been dismembered. The body was completely damaged. It was beaten severely. It was apparent that whoever carried out this abominable act had serious bad blood with him, so to speak. Someone seriously dangerous had done this. They must have utterly despised him to do what they did. On further inspection of the body, it was also discovered that the murderer had taken out his teeth. His head suggested that it had sustained multiple blunt force attacks. If that was not enough torture for a body to go through, the investigation found a 3-inch nail hammered into the body's skull. And that is not even the end of it. The autopsy further revealed stab wounds on the entirety of the body, totaling around 50. In addition to that, there was a very visible cut across his throat. But that is not what killed him and knocked his life out. Shockingly, this man had made it through all that excruciating pain. He had survived this hell. The cause of death seemed to be strangulation. His neck was covered in marks from a wire. This man had gone through a whirl of torture before he could escape this world. All the stabs, the wounds, bruises, cuts, and scratches on his body revealed signs of healing. This suggested that all of this torture had occurred a while before his death. The police said this was one of the most heinous homicide cases the department has ever seen. Doing the autopsy of a body that is burnt and cut up into pieces is not an easy job. The task at hand now was to find out who this person was. A dental identification was not possible, considering his teeth had been pulled out. The fire had burnt off his fingerprints, making it difficult for the investigators. They found parts of the fingers that were partially burnt, usually all of them together. They could make out the fingerprint of one finger, and they were able to identify the man. This unfortunate killing was of a 46-year-old man named Terry Neely. Terry was confined to a motorized wheelchair and was categorized as disabled. Although he was not completely paralyzed, he could walk if he needed, but only very short distances. He lived in an assisted living facility in Phoenix, Arizona. The police were stumped. Who would want to hurt a disabled man? One that could not even defend himself. What could this man have possibly done in order to deserve this brutality? The police made their way to the care facility to get further insight into this man. They contacted his carers, staff, friends, and acquaintances to gather more information on Terry Neely, to find out who could be associated with the murderer of this disabled man. According to people at the facility and those who frequently contacted Terry, he was a nice man who never abused, disturbed, or hurt anyone in any way. His disability had not stopped him from being a kind, friendly person. They were unaware of a single person who had anything against him or any ongoing fights or feuds. The residents and staff of the care home were cleared as they all had an alibi. The life of Terry Neely outside of this facility was a complete question mark, so where could they even begin? The facility did give one important piece of information that could tremendously help the case. Terry Neely had not checked into the facility for 3 days. He had been missing. The facility camera records show that Terry had left the facility on the 2nd of August at around 8 p.m., 3 days before he was found dead. What happened in these 3 days? The police had nothing to go on. Terry had no friends or family that they knew of, or that had any information on this case. It was a dead end. However, there was one big lingering question. Where was his motorized wheelchair? If they could just find that wheelchair, maybe they could uncover the reason behind his death. A search was started and officials scattered all around to search for any sight of the chair. The church and the entire surrounding area were thoroughly explored. Garbage bins were turned upside down. Streets were searched. No sign of the wheelchair. Perhaps this was a dead end. This case was going to wind up on top of the cold case files. But wait, not long later, the Arizona Police Department issued a warrant for an arrest for something totally unrelated to this case. 2 people were brought in on the charges of armed robbery. A man named Edward McFarland, commonly known as Cracker, and a woman named Angela Simpson. Coincidentally, the police found out that Angela was an acquaintance of Terry. So they brought her down to the interrogation room and started questioning her about Terry Neely. Luckily for them, they got more than they bargained for. Angela Simpson was not holding back information. She immediately admitted to the murder of Terry, and quite proudly too at that. But wait, people make false confessions sometimes to seem tough. How are we sure that she is the murderer? Angela gave the police all the details they needed to solve the case, including details of the violence that perfectly matched the injuries found during the autopsy. The details she gave about the torture would shiver us down your spine. She admitted to having spent 3 days torturing the man until he could not bear it. While he was strapped to his torture chair, he was forced to look at the mirror so that he could see himself getting what he deserved. She made him watch himself getting beaten, tortured, getting his teeth pulled out ferociously, and having a nail hammered into his head. She used a tire iron to make him endure pain. She admitted to slicing his throat, not all the way, just enough to make him feel the agony. She stabbed him all over his body with her knife. The ferocious woman made this man suffer through immeasurable torture, all while he was alive. Angela told the police that her favorite kind of torture was ripping out his teeth, and for that, she used pliers. I took him to my house, walked him down the street, walked him upstairs, kicked his ass, and killed him. After he got the sweet release of death, she decided not to stop there. Angela went ahead and cut up his beaten up body in pieces. She did not let him go, even at this point. For what remained of his body, she threw it in a trash bag and dumped it into the trash can on the church property. Before fleeing the scene, she set the body on fire. Her only regret from this incident, she did not torture him enough. I would have kept him alive a week. I would have tortured him for a week instead of 3 days, and I regret not killing my other victim. She allegedly wanted to kill another man, an armed robber. The only reason she let it go was because she didn't have time to spare, as she had to be somewhere at the time. Unlike other killers, Angela seemed to be relieved that the police caught up with her. Angela Simpson was born on November 29, 1975, and just like most murderous criminal minds, she was no stranger to a peculiar life. She gave little to no information about her life. All she mentioned that she was having an illness. From the very young age of 10 years old, Angela had been frequently visiting mental institutions and health facilities. It turns out that she was diagnosed with not one, but several mental disorders. One thing that we do know for sure is that Angela did not have a loving, nurturing, peaceful environment in which she could grow. As well as her poor health conditions and lifestyle, Angela did not experience a nice childhood. She was in and out of multiple foster care systems. She never even had a normal job where she could showcase her smart conversational skills. Angela survived working in the streets. She spent her life in hospitals. And as soon as she was cleared from the hospital, she dived face first into a life of crime and darkness. And it only went downhill from there. Angela got her hands on drugs, but her being poor came in between her and her love for getting too dosed up. To continue getting temporarily bliss from her addiction, Angela started getting her hands dirty so that she could get money for her dealer. She started committing offenses and even dabbled into prostitution in order to pay her dues and make a living for herself. That was how she got mixed up with Terry Neely. He was a common client of hers. On the day he went missing, Angela lured Terry into an abandoned apartment with the promise of sex and drugs, two things an addict can't refuse. The poor guy rolled himself into his darkest nightmare. In the family and neighborhood that Angela grew up in, crime was considered the norm. It was no big deal for people to steal a few things, commit crimes, and end up in the clink. She even mentioned in her interview that she has a lot of family in prison, and I am okay with that. I got many sisters in prison. I can't wait to see them. It is not really that much of a punishment to be sentenced to spend my life with my family. It was unclear whether she was talking about her actual family or just the women that she was close with. And of course, mental illnesses are also ordinary in such a society of crime and violence. This was probably why no one suspected Angela was any different or could grow up committing such an unexplainable, heinous crime. The murderer has never experienced real love, or the company of a lover, or even family for that matter. And yet, in spite of her aloneness, Angela refuses to talk about her life or her children in her interviews with investigators. None of the children live with Angela. She declines to address their circumstances or provide any information regarding their biological fathers. She is very careful about the things she reveals, carefully calculating every word she says. When it comes to her crimes, she's a wide open book, going over each detail. But when it comes to herself, Angela won't speak a word. So, it was your pleasure when you committed this murder. Yes. What motivated Angela to commit such a contemptible crime? Apparently, Terry was a snitch. Angela told the police that Terry had openly admitted to having connections with law enforcement and putting people in prison. He had apparently told the police information on a lot of individuals and got them locked up. He was the reason why all of these people were serving time. He bragged about being an informant in front of Angela, and that was what got her riled up. 36-year-old Angela was eager to let everyone know that she had killed Terry. Angela came from a neighborhood of gain and did not compromise when it came to the street code. He told on a righteous person years ago. He told me that. So I beat him to death. I killed him and cut him up. She believed snitches to be the most despicable people. She had her own moral code, much different than the rest of society, and she operated solely on that. In her world, killing was justified if the people you kill are bad, just like informants. Do you feel guilty? Guilty for ridding the world of a snitch? No, I don't feel guilty. According to her, snitches and pedophiles were the scum of the earth and deserved every bit of death. I believe informants and child molesters to be killed, period. When Terry told Angela about his act of humanity, Her outlook on him completely changed. She knew that he had to disappear from the face of Earth, and she had taken it upon herself to do that. During her famous interview, she mentioned that Terry gave her a number of names that he had helped get caught. She admitted that she did not know a single person out of them and believed his words. When the interview made her dwell on the possibility of him not being an informant, she responded, "Oops, if he wasn't." Angela mentions that she does not want her offspring or the people she has formed a bond with to live in a world with snitches. Not ruthless murderers or people that torture other beings, snitches. When the police searched the abandoned apartment, they found cut-up patches of carpet and a bottle of bleach. A barren apartment with no furniture around, just a ripped-out carpet. It was a crime scene cover-up, a pretty obvious one at that. The blood was still all over the place, and using that blood, they were able to match it to the victim. On March 22nd, Angela Simpson pleaded guilty to the first-degree murder of Terry Neely. Angela was sentenced to life in prison. Judge Paul McMurdy sentenced her to 14 years in prison for additional charges. While talking about her system of justice, Angela admitted that she should have been given the death penalty. It was not that she wanted that. That was what she considered fair and what she was prepared for. I heard them say I was possessed by the devil. I think that is hilarious. Isn't that beautiful? There's nothing that is scarier than a person that has nothing to lose. She must have had a tormented childhood for her to act in such a vicious way. She is one of the most sadistic killers we have ever stumbled upon. And those are the most dangerous ones because you can never really predict what is coming. The way she talks so gathered and very upfront is fascinating, if not incredibly scary. If you closely watch this interview, you can notice how she shifts her mood afterward, as if she's putting up a face for the camera. It's clear that she has a way with words. It was as though she was talking about a day in her life and not a violent murder. A true classic sociopath. A woman you would not ever want to mess with. She showed zero remorse when it came to her crime. She even expressed her disappointment at having missed the possibility and opportunity to kill other informers in her jail interviews. Angela doesn't plan to let herself be taken easily in prison. She draws violent, pornographic images of police officers and hands them to the police to make them feel uncomfortable. She wants everyone to know she is capable of making their worst nightmares come true. Sergeant Pike talks about Angela. Simpson, I think, is a very scary individual. She is probably the only one in there that I take every precaution in the world to make sure my staff and myself are safe. She is the one in this whole jail that creeps me out. She'll stare you down sometimes, and you get the little hair on the back of your neck to stand up. She's an interesting character, to say the least. When questioned about if dismembering a body is difficult, Angela said that it was easier than one would imagine. She even nudged the interviewer to try it, saying that it has a very low charge. Women generally don't commit crimes this heinous, right? This is hugely the domain of men. That's unfortunate. On her list of the worst and most vile creatures to live on Earth, the first place is taken by child molesters. Second on the list are snitches, and police officers take up third place. Murderers do not fall anywhere near the list. In Angela's opinion, every killer has a reason, almost like an obligation to wipe out some of the bad weeds. But, of course, her list of bad weeds is completely different from that of the rest of society. You need to look at the dead instead of the one who killed. As they say, don't mess with a person that is not scared of anything. A person who simply does not care. Will you kill again? If the opportunity arises, I hope so. Thanks for tuning in to Twisted Minds. That was the case of Angela Simpson. And why don't you go ahead and click on one of the 2 videos on your screen for another one of our videos.